So this will be maybe mercifully short. And if it were any other presentation, I probably would still be on Capitol Hill. But I really did want to join you today. This is the notion of a tipping point, I think. And we're rushing to do a year's worth of legislation in 10 days. And one of them, mercifully, is the transportation. I am really pleased with what my friends Bill Schuster and Peter DePazio were able to do with that piece of legislation. We won't talk about how it's funded, cats and dogs and strange things. But the framework of the bill is solid. And by shortening it to 5 years, we're able to raise the funding level. We've got reauthorization of Amtrak for the first time since 2008. And most important, I think, it's an opportunity for us to shift to actual implementation rather than dealing with the consequences of 36 short-term reauthorizations. We need one more short-term reauthorization. But it looks like things are moving forward. And I am extraordinarily optimistic that using this time, we have an opportunity to make some real progress dealing with the rail agenda. Since I feel like I'm still a part of the T&I committee where I spent my first 2 years. In fact, last spring in the gym, one of the members of the committee wondered why I didn't have a tie on yet, because we were having the committee picture. And I guess I speak so much on the stuff and interfere with it, and thought I was still on the committee that I've not served on for 10 years. But I did make the transition to Ways and Means because I am focused on the funding of infrastructure. And part of what's going to be, I think, absolutely critical is building the foundation you're talking about in the course of the program here this morning and on in the afternoon. Passenger rail service in the United States is a program that wouldn't die no matter how hard Congress and some administrations tried to kill it. I remember having a celebratory press conference where we were getting $550 million and just nirvana. People around the country are enamored with rail service. They understand the power and the potential. We've talked about the amazing job concentration around the Acela corridor. Well, that same job concentration actually has potential in corridors around the country. We're watching just in the Pacific Northwest where we've been able to cobble together a little bit of investment, and we've almost doubled passenger service. And when you talk to people about the prospect of being able to have less than 2-hour service from downtown Portland to downtown Seattle, not have to be harassed by bomb-sniffing dogs, being able to work comfortably throughout the trip, people's eyes light up in terms of what the economic potential is. We find that many parts of the country are connected by passenger rail that are extraordinarily hard to serve and have extortionate line ticket rates. At a time when we still have over 40% of the air travel in the United States being under 350 miles, our being able to focus on corridors, Chicago to St. Louis, Portland to Seattle, this is a tremendous opportunity. I'm excited by the conversations that are taking place around the progress being made between Dallas and Houston. It's a real project. And the opportunity there, the density, sort of the wild west approach to Texas, nonetheless, there's an opportunity to put that piece together. The determination of Governor Brown that he's going to dedicate resources into California high-speed rail. And I know there's lots of roadblocks along the way, lots of constructive critics. But as that comes together, people are going to embrace it dramatically. I have long said that we will have high-speed rail in this country faster than we think. The only question is whether it will be design build from the Chinese and the Spaniards, sort of outsourcing the jobs and paying higher for the services we need to, or whether we'll get our act together. And I am hopeful. I mean, the reason I am here is to urge that all of us who care about a passenger rail agenda for this country, for its environmental, for its economic development potential, for being able to actually enhance air transport. If we get the rail passenger system right, we'll be able to free up airport space and reduce negative consequences of air travel more cost effectively than any other approach that we could take. I am convinced that you are going to get a better Congress next year. I don't know whether my friend and colleague Ron Wyden is going to chair the Senate Finance Committee or merely be a ranking member, but the margin is going to be closer, and I think people are going to get some of this out of their system and be more reasonable. We will have some changes in the House that will be beneficial. And last but not least, those of you in this room who have watched the experience of two-term presidencies, Republican, Democrat, popular, unpopular, the air sort of goes out of the balloon, and there are some unusual challenges that the Obama administration has faced. We're going to turn that page. So I think a better Congress, a new administration, the opportunity to have 5 years of certainty with slightly higher funding levels, and being able to build on the success that we've seen. I think this is the perfect time to be able to take the initiative so that when next we revisit the reauthorization, we're in a position to do a much better job. I've been on this sort of lonely crusade to raise America's gas tax for the first time in 22 years. I'm pleased to report that we won the battle of the editorial boards. From the Los Angeles Times to the New York Times to the Washington Post has pounded this drum at least a dozen times this year. We're watching what's happening in very red Republican states, 7 of which have already raised the gas tax this year, the same way Ronald Reagan did in 1982. And I think we're reaching a point where we'll be able to deal much more effectively with the recess question. My prediction is that within 10 years, the United States will have a carbon tax. Not only will it help us save the planet, but it was an opportunity for us to be able to use resources in a constructive way, like our infrastructure, which is broadly supported, doesn't have to be partisan, but people just get wrapped around the axle in terms of the funding. So I am hopeful that we're going to be able to redouble our efforts in communities large and small about the stake they have in passenger rail. For us to be able to tout the progress that's being made, not get hung up so much on high-speed rail, but higher speed rail. Because while I welcome the notion of having a bullet train between Dallas and Fort Worth, we actually, as you know, don't need that. If we get up to the operating limits of 100, 125, 150 miles an hour, it will serve those existing corridors in a way that will be transformational. And 125 miles an hour is not rocket science. There is obviously some track upgrades and innovation and whatnot, but this is entirely within our capacity very quickly. Being realistic about higher speed rail, supporting the transformative projects, and redoubling the efforts at the grassroots about what's at stake and building the coalition. building the coalition. A conference like this should have at least half the participants from the development community. Having the redevelopment of train stations, of being able to service high capacity employment centers, this is a gold mine for them. And as increasingly it's awkward to be able to use many of our airports, being able to use high-speed rail is a key generator for jobs. I appreciate your willingness to put up with me in a squeaky voice. I appreciate your investing the time today on the role that the federal government is playing now, and more importantly, what role can be played in the future, and thinking about building those coalitions and those partnerships so that this is the decade that we realize that promise. Thank you very much. Is there two comments or questions?
We have time for one or two comments or questions, if anyone has any.
I welcome observations about things that fall in.
Peter,
Does anybody else have a comment?
Hey, no, just one. We've been talking today, Congressman Art Gazzetti. The bill it does put rail in the same conversation with highways and transit. We could say, is that a coincidence? Is that just the way things flow, or do you see something meaningful in that? Is it really going to be here forward a multimodal, comprehensive surface transportation discussion?
Well, I think it's in part both Bill and Peter care about rail transportation. In Bill's case, he's continuing a family tradition, working with his father as a member of the committee that he chaired. I mean, this was something that he cared about for a variety of reasons. Being able to start harmonizing the conversations and think about how the pieces fit together. For me, this is the most profound development that has taken place in my career in Congress. When I first came here, I was talking about livable communities and land use planning and goofy things we do in Oregon. Now, those principles are accepted. It's how you put the pieces together. It's the land use. It's multimodal. There is not a single mode. There's not a single solution. They work better in tandem with everything from streetcars and bicycles to highways, air, and certainly passenger rail service. I think this is a recognition of where America is going. Congress has been 2 steps behind, but we've got a number of regions that are pursuing it to a high art, and that not only makes it work better, but that's key to getting the public acceptance that I talked about. I believe deeply in financing and building our infrastructure. The physical infrastructure is important, but the human infrastructure, the civic infrastructure, the advocacy is absolutely essential. And that's one that we've got to redouble our efforts. This bill, including as it does the rail title, some of the provisions that are kind of encouraging broader conversations and strategizing, I think is a welcome addition to it. Peter, who are you?
First of all, Congressman, thank you for all your work on getting this bill through. I mean, it really means a lot to everybody in this room to have that done. So now that it is done, and we're looking at how to implement projects and programs around the country, you mentioned the California project. One of the challenges that project has, along with I think most of the other projects, is the array of federal requirements that overlap, that conflict. California's, to get the environmental work done for their project, has to deal with 6 federal agencies. And it's very complicated, and the question that I have for you is there an appetite on Capitol Hill to look at how to pull those processes together and get us to a streamlined process, not just within the transportation DOT world, but across these other agencies?
Great observation and comment, Peter. And I think absolutely there is an appetite. Part of the problem on Capitol Hill is that this gets mixed up with other conversations that are against climate change, or where the conversation gets hijacked by extreme positions. If we're able to craft this properly, we can get people from across the political spectrum to agree with us. Actually, I think we have more federal oversight today than we need, than we can afford, and than we deserve. And I say that with affection. Some of my favorite people are within the federal bureaucracy. My most rewarding phase of my career was 10 years actually administering programs at the city of Portland as Public Works Commissioner. We need to be able to do a better job of both identifying simple additions and framing it in a way that's non-threatening. I think we can squeeze dramatically the costs and time out of the federal process. California arguably has stronger environmental standards than the federal government. Why shouldn't that suffice? And who would object to that if we framed it properly and advanced it? This is something that I am making in every speech I make around the country. I try and go someplace every month to either get you a better Congress or harangue people about transportation livability. In every presentation, I include the notion that we need to work together to refine the process. It shouldn't take longer to design, plan, and permit a project than to construct it. And it is not just transportation. I'm in the middle of an environmental Superfund cleanup for the Willamette River in the city of Portland. I was involved with that when I was on the city council and commissioner of public works more than 20 years ago. And then we were trying to keep a project out of the Superfund process. It was going to, we thought, take 5 years and cost $15 million. We're 15 years into the Superfund process. Cost estimates are $1.4 billion north, and we may get a record of decision this year. We spent $1/3 of $1 billion and cleaned up nothing. Sue Stahl study. I mean, again, some of my best friends are lawyers, but this is something that we all need to take seriously. We need to do a better job of framing the conversation, and that we enlist allies. I mean, there are people within the federal government that are sympathetic to this. They don't want to just screw people up. There are ways that we ought to be able to engage red states and blue states and take some of these projects and squeeze the excess process out and replace it with performance-based protections. I bleed green. I will do nothing to undermine environmental protections. I just finished saying, I believe in the citizen infrastructure. There are ways we need to engage the citizens, because if they aren't, we get screwed. They're going to have their say one way or another, and that's the number of the delays that we see from projects, is when they short circuit the citizens, and then they end up having their day literally in court or politically. And I would welcome an opportunity to continue that conversation. I hope it's a priority for APTA. I hope it's a priority for the outgoing administration in the DOT and from the incoming administration. There is a win-win here, absolutely. and being able to work with you to dial down specific suggestions, not just bad examples, which we all have for a variety of reasons, but ways that we can cut this, I think, is essential. This will do more to enhance our infrastructure than even raising the gas tax if we do it right now.
Thank you.
Okay, well,